Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Hotep Jesus, we back with another live presentation. I am your host, Bryan Hotep Jesus Sharpe. Shout out to my video guy, got me that beautiful lower third. Slowly but surely, we're making these streams, broadcasts better and better. Piecemealing. Like I always tell people when you're building things, building businesses, piecemeal. Make it better little by little. That's simple. You don't have to be perfect coming straight out the box. Unless you got a large budget, you can try to get as close to perfect. If you have a large budget, large team, then you can try to get as close to perfect as possible. Otherwise, piecemeal it. Let's tweet this out. I'm going to share it on my timeline one more again. Then we're going to get into this presentation. The internet is arguing about, can Lil Wayne match Jay-Z's discography? And although I can appreciate both artists, that is exactly what's wrong with the world. Just completely distracted by nonsense. You know, especially for a community who said they're going through so much trouble and pain and oppression. You would think that they'd have more pressing issues to discuss, but that's neither here nor there. God bless all those souls enjoying that conversation. I can't be bothered with it. Maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow night. Oh, it's been told you, because we talk about a lot on that show. Oh, man. All right. Where do we go from here? So this morning, actually, before we do that, we're going to Unstupid America. Hotep Nation is dedicated to marketing and branding homeschooling throughout the 2022 calendar year. And with your help, we can make this thing possible. I had a meeting this morning with our coordinator. We have some wonderful souls chipping in on this thing. We have two moms. One of them's a new homeschooler who's starting up a pod, and we have another one who's homeschooled 5 kids, and they're all very successful. One of them was top 2 in the nation to get a scholarship to a prestigious university. And they only gave out 2 of those scholarships at this university. So we have experienced homeschool moms helping us put this program together to provide the resources to families to get the questions answered that they need answered on how do you transition from, mainstream school. And I don't even want to call it traditional, because I feel like homeschooling should be traditional. Mainstream, mass mainstream education, Rockefeller funded Board of Education schooling, to new traditional homeschooling. You can help us out at hotepnation.com/donate. We have several donors already. Let me go visit the link right now, and then we'll get into this great reset conversation. Yeah, we have 4 donors already, raised $105 out of the $50,000 goal. So please help us out. I haven't even put my foot in this, or broadcasted it to the Twitters yet. It's just been all through these streams and a little bit through email. So every little bit counts. We appreciate you. We'll also be moving away from the Patreon and going straight through our website. So Patreon subscribers, look out for that as we transition away from Patreon. Okay, so Bearded Renter Homeschooling Initiative. Let's get it. I was homeschooled my whole life and would strongly recommend everyone with children look into it. There you go. You gotta love it. Okay, so the Great Reset. The new newspaper is Twitter. Just is what it is. It's the newspaper. You open up Twitter, you get the trending topics, and you can see what the big headlines of the day are. And this morning, I ran across this Great Reset conversation, and I was kind of like confused, and I'm like, I thought we already knew about this. And, why is this new? Why are people talking about this now? And apparently, what happened was some letter came out from the World Economic Forum. I guess it's Borja Brende is the president, to Miss Sigrid Kaag, Minister of Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation. And in this letter, it says, "It is my great pleasure and honor to invite you to the 51st World Economic Forum annual meeting, which will take place from the 26th to 29th January 2021, Switzerland, nice neutral country. With this true global gathering, bringing together political business, civil society, and media leaders at the highest level, the forum aims to provide a clear signal at the beginning of next year that the world has moved out of the pandemic. The discussions will focus on shaping policies for post-bug era under the theme of the Great Reset." Continues and says, "The action group and are a member of the regional action group for the Middle East and North Africa. Your contributions to the work of the Great Reset will be especially critical to ANME and your participation." Right. All right. So I guess this is like, I don't know. What is this guy saying? Calvin Robinson. He says, "Are you ready to have a discussion about the influence of the WEF? The Great Reset can no longer be dismissed as a conspiracy theory. They've released their manifesto via websites, videos, and books. The plan is that by 2030, you will own nothing and you will be happy." I don't know. I think what's missing here, and it's just a tweet, so I don't know if I can fault him. If I'm getting grifty vibes from this tweet, like it's just missing a lot of context. Fact checkers, mainstream media has never said that the Great Reset didn't exist. What they're saying is people's interpretation of it is the conspiracy theory. And they've been quite, the fact checkers and, the powers that be have been quite clear and have been quite upfront about the Great Reset. We've heard plenty of people mention the Great Reset. So, and like he said, they've released books, right? And we're going to get into that in a second. So, I don't know what the big deal is. I don't understand what the big deal is behind this. So I decided to do some research on my own and say, well, I've never actually looked into the Great Reset. So let me look into the Great Reset from the source themselves, right? Now, first, let's dive into what they're saying about the conspiracy theorists, right? And this is from the ADL, and this is published December 29th, 2020. This is last year. Blah, 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 blah. Conspiracy gained traction with the ongoing spread of the bug 19 in both mainstream and fringe circles alike. They warn that global elites will use the pandemic to advance their interests and push forward a globalist plot to destroy American sovereignty and prosperity. Now, keep that in mind as we progress through this presentation. He says, destroy American sovereignty and prosperity. Now, they're saying this is a conspiracy theory. Now, we're going to look at what the authors of the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum say about this. And then I'll let you determine if it is a pernicious strain of the conspiracy. It says references to the Great Reset conspiracy can be found in a range of social media platforms, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. All right, who cares? So we've gone over that, right? Now we know exactly what's happening with the conspiracy and what they say is a conspiracy, right? Some globalist plot, right? That's what they say. It's a globalist plot. Well, we are going to get to the bottom of this right now. Are you ready? Let's pull up the sources here. Let me get my sources pulled up on the screen so you guys can follow along. I don't do conspiracy theories. I do conspiracy facts and interpretation of the facts. Okay. So let's pull this up. Let's go here. Boom. So in their document, I believe this is called The Great Reset, produced by Klaus Schwab and another individual. Matter of fact, let me say that individual's name just to be thorough. This is backed by the World Economic Forum. And this is Thierry Malaret, or Malaret, I guess, because he's French. So Klaus Schwab, they say, is the founder and executive chairman of World Economic Forum. In 1971, he published Modern Enterprise Management. Yeah, conspiracy analyst. I like that. Thanks, Josh. He argues in that book that a company must serve not only shareholders. He holds a doctorate in economics and engineering. Obtained a master's degree in public administration, Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. Leadership at the Forum, professor at University of Geneva. Latest books, Fourth Industrial Revolution, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this guy's got a lot of paper on the wall. Got a lot of paper on the wall. So he ain't no dummy. I'm not going to say this guy's a dummy. I'm not going to say anything like that. This Thierry guy, managing partner of the Monthly Barometer, provides analysis to private investors, global CEOs, and opinion decision makers. Educated at Sorbonne, Ecole d'Etudes from French University, St. Anthony's, Oxford. He holds a master's degree in economics and history, a PhD in economics. His career spans investment banking, think tanks, academia, and government. Okay. Cool. Let's dive into the information now. Let's pull this up. Y'all saw what popped up on the screen just a second ago. So there's a chapter in this book. Let me pull this to the side so I can see, because last time they tried to freeze my stream. So here we go. In the book 133, it says The Return of Big Government. And in the words of Jack Micklethwait and Adrian Wooldridge, the Bug 19 panic has made government important again. Not just powerful again. Look at those once mighty companies begging for help, but also vital again. It matters enormously whether your country has a good health service, competent bureaucrats, and sound finances. Good government is the difference between living and dying. I don't know how to take that. We can take it two ways. Again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy analyst. We can take this two ways. We can say that without government, you may die, right? And with good government, you can flourish. But we can also say that with government, you could die. We could also take that to say that if you have a bad government, it could kill you. We could interpret it like that, right? It says good government is the difference between living and dying. So if good government is living, then bad government is dying. So we now have to judge, what do we have, a good government or bad government? Let's continue. It says here, one of the greatest lessons of the past centuries in Europe and America is this: acute crises contribute to boosting the power of the state. Little black dude, appreciate you. Little black duck, 2001. Big ups to the Hotep Nation. Phenomenal interview yesterday with Tanada Science Guy. Yeah, if you guys missed that interview, we covered the book 19 and the pandemic. Wonderful conversation with a genius. Make sure I go watch that. It is required listening and watching. I'll have it up on Apple and SoundCloud and Spotify soon. So it says here, acute crises contribute to boosting the power of the state. Now, if you read my book, where is it? Not this one. You definitely need to read this one. You definitely need to read, here, let me pop myself up here. You definitely need to read this, Unbreakable Rules of Masculinity. That's a must read for men. Women say they like it too, I guess. But if you read this, The Patriot Report, Unmasking the Conspiracy of Money and War, shout out to Rollo Tomasi. He did the cover on this book. Should have made the font bigger. It would have been a lot thicker. I could have made this a really big book, but whatever. The Patriot Report, if you read this, then you know this already. You know this. If you've been following conspiracies for a while, you also know this. Acute crises, if you follow Alex Jones, you know this, right? Acute crises contribute to the boosting the power of the state. It says this right here in the document. It says it right there. So let's go back. Let's just make sure we keep this in context with what the ADL said, right? What did the ADL tell us? The ADL said, it said here, the conspiracy theorists, global elites, to push forward a globalist plot to destroy American sovereignty and prosperity. Right? That's what it says right there. So let's keep that in context. Okay? You don't want to lose sight of that. It's hold on, let me bring this back up. Okay, cool. I don't want to lose y'all. Okay. It's always been the case that there is no reason why it should be different with the pandemic. Historians point to the fact that the rising fiscal resources of capitalist countries from the 18th century onwards were always closely associated with the need to fight wars. Again, if you read my book, The Patriot Report, Unmasking the Conspiracy of Money and War, you see the correlation between, what does it say here? Capitalist countries from the 18th century onwards were always closely associated with the need to fight wars. So you're talking about capitalism and war. They are closely intertwined. That's why I wrote this book. It says it right there. The Conspiracy of Money and War. You cannot separate the two. You cannot separate the two. Okay? Let's go back. Okay. So it gives an example. Such was the case of 7 Years' War, 1756, 1763. Described as the first truly global war that involved all great powers in Europe at the time. Since then, the responses to major crises have always further consolidated the power of the state, starting with taxation. It says right here, the responses to major crises have always further consolidated the power of the state, starting with taxation. An inherent and essential attribute of sovereignty belonging as a matter of right to every independent government. A few examples illustrating the point strongly suggest that this time, as in the past, taxation will increase. As in the past, the social and rational political justification underlying the increases will be based upon the narrative of countries at war, only this time against an invisible enemy, the bug. Okay? And then it goes on, he shows an example here. France's top rate of income tax was 0 in 1914. A year after the end of the World War, it was 50%. Canada introduced, hold on a second. Actually, you know what? I'm not. I was gonna drop some theme music in the background, but let's continue. Canada introduced income tax in 1917 as a temporary measure to finance the war, and then expanded it dramatically during World War II with a flat 20% surtax imposed on all income tax payable by persons other than corporations, and the introduction of high marginal tax rates. Rates came down after the war, but remained substantially higher than they had been before. Let's stop right there. One thing you got to understand is with the powers that be is they don't hide anything. Well, I can't say anything. They've redacted a lot of documents. But most of their plans are hidden in plain sight. And like Tanai said last night, over 50% of Americans can't read. Now, if we add in the amount of Americans that do read, it's probably even worse, right? Or don't read, choose not to read. It's probably like, 70%, 60%, something stupid like that. Very few of us actually read. Like when I saw this thing pop up, the first thing I said was, why am I going to sit here speculating on the Great Reset and what this influencer said and what this guy said in his YouTube video? I was like, let me just get the book and I'll see exactly what the World Economic Forum is saying for myself, and then I can analyze it. So that's what I did. I spent a couple of hours reading the book this morning. I read. I don't know. I got lucky. I know how to read. So instead of me waiting for CNN to tell me what this stuff is, I read it. And they're not hiding anything. He's giving you the facts right here. Let's continue. At times, the sovereign power of the state to tax translated into tangible societal gains in different domains, such as the creation of a welfare system. Which is what? More dependence upon government, expanded government. Let's continue. However, these massive transitions to something entirely new were always defined in terms of a response to a violent external shock or the threat of one to come. World War II, for example, led to the introduction of cradle-to-the-grave welfare systems in most of Europe. Okay. So right here, again, they're telling you that a violent external shock or the threat of one to come. We've all seen examples of this. We've lived through them. Let's continue. It says today, the situation is fundamentally different. In the intervening decades in the Western world, the role of the state has shrunk considerably. I'm not quite sure how he's quantifying that, so I'll reserve judgment. I would say that's not true in my view, but again, I don't know how he's quantifying that. So let's continue. This is a situation that is set to change because it is hard. Right here, it says this is a situation that is set to change because it is hard to imagine how an exogenous shock of such magnitude as the one inflicted by the bug could be addressed with purely market-based solutions. So he's saying that the private sector cannot solve this problem. No doubt, Dave B. We getting you through the workday and educating you. I love it. All right. Continues. Says for the first time since Margaret Thatcher captured the zeitgeist of an era when declaring that there is no such thing as society, governments have the upper hand. Again, let's go back. Not a conspiracy theorist. Conspiracy analyst. And what did they say? They said the conspiracy theorists are saying global elites will use the demic to advance their interests and push forward a globalist plot to destroy American society and prosperity. We just showed you examples from the World Economic Forum of how this could be true. ADL need to take their problem up with the World Economic Forum. Maybe World Economic Forum are some conspiracy theorists. Maybe we need to talk to Klaus Schwab and say, yo, stop being a conspiracy theorist. Margaret Thatcher, stop being a conspiracy theorist. Maybe that's what we need to do. Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. Again, just the facts. Just the facts. We not theorizing, just the facts. Steph Colonel, the Great Reset equals colonist European Renaissance. Bars. Okay. Everything that comes in the post-demic era will lead us to rethink government's role. Rather than simply fixing market failures when they arise, they should, as suggested by economist Mariana Mazzucato, pay attention to this quote right here. She says, move towards actively shaping and creating markets that deliver sustainable and inclusive growth. I'm going to finish reading and we'll go back to that statement. They should also ensure that partnerships with business involving government funds are driven by public interest and not profit. So we got to break that down. We got to stop right there. We got to break that down. Let's break down the first sentence. So they're advocating for, I would call communism. Some would call it socialism. Some would call it crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is simply exploitation of socialist systems, as defined by Bryan Sharpe, yours truly. Okay? So she says here, you want the governments to move towards actively shaping and creating markets. What? What? No, that's not how economics works. That's not how economics work. And they send people to school to learn this stuff. She's probably got a degree in this situation, or 2 or 3 of them. And she thinks it's wise for the government to interfere with the economy. No, it's not. It's not. Every time they do, they fail. Let's look at the second part. Mariana says, they should also ensure that partnerships with business involving government funds are driven by public interest and not profit. First of all, there should be no partnerships between business and government. We can't have that. We can't have that. Either one or the other. There can't be no partnerships. That's communism. That's straight up communism. Go look at the 10 planks of communism. That's communism. Okay? And she says, this shit gets worse, yo. This shit gets much worse. And I wasn't supposed to do this chapter yet. I was supposed to do this chapter last. But we get here anyway, so let's continue. They want government funds should be driven by public interest and not profit. How, Mariana? How? The existence of money is literally for private interest. It's literally for your own private interest. It's the nature of money. That's the nature of money. You cannot remove private interest from money. At some point, somebody's going to say, there's a lot of money floating around. I might be able to help some of my own people with this. Even if the government creates a budget, some, a politician is going to hire their daughter out in California to come work for them or get their own little office and get some of that budget. Type the name in the chat if you know who I'm talking about. And then how do you even judge public interest? And then it's sneaky. This is sneaky too. This is really sneaky too, because when they say public interest and you have a media that shapes public interest and the media works for the oligarchs, does public interest even matter? Who gets to decide whose public interest matters? What if Group A wants something different from Group B? Group A says, I want more police. Group B says they want less police. Whose public interest matters? Because he says, driven by public interest and not profit. Again, I reiterate, how can you say public interest when CNN and Fox and the rest of the mainstream media is shaping public opinion? Mostly the left. I think the right is just keeping Fox is keeping some of the right with enough statism that they still believe in government, right? Still and still contribute to big government. That's what the whole role of the GOP is: create statism. So we can see that. But mostly the left is shaping public opinion. We see it on social media. Outside of the individuals who are not on social media, those poor souls will be subject to decisions made by some social media blue check moron. Let's continue. So he says, looking to the future, governments will most likely, but with different degrees of intensity, decide that it's in the best interest of society to rewrite some of the rules of the game and permanently increase their role. Governments will most likely, but with different degrees of intensity, decide that it's in the best interest of society to rewrite some of the rules of the game and permanently increase their role. And he gives an example. He says, as happened in 1930s in the U.S., when massive unemployment and economic insecurity were progressively addressed by a larger role of the government, today, similar course of action is likely to characterize the foreseeable future. We review in other subchapters the form this will take, like in the next one, on the social contract. But let's briefly identify some of the most salient points. Okay? Let's finish. Let's continue. Now, this is where it gets weird. The financialization of the world that gained so much traction in the past years will probably go into reverse. Basically saying it's fuck capitalism. That's how I interpret the sentence. If anybody interprets it otherwise, let me know. That's how I interpret that. Governments, particularly in the countries most affected by it, the US and the UK, will be forced to reconsider many features of this obsession with finance. What? So if these people are saying what the future Great Reset is, looks like finance is under attack. And we're going to go through the US dollar and that stuff a little bit later in the presentation. People ask for equality, and this to me looks like equality through poverty. That's what it looks like to me. Let's continue. He says, some countries will nationalize, while others will prefer to take equity stakes to provide loans. Okay. Now, some people are going to let that slide, right? Like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty harmless. Does it, though? Does it sound harmless? Let's go to investopedia.com and let's look up what nationalization means. Right? So I want to go here. Let's pop this up. Nationalization. Okay. It says nationalization refers to the action of a government taking control of a company or industry, which generally occurs without compensation for the loss of the net worth of seized assets and potential income. The action may be the result of a nation's attempt to consolidate power, resentment of foreign ownership of industries representing significant importance in local economies, or the prop up of failing industries. I'm going to read that again. Nationalization refers to the action of government taking control of a company or industry, which generally occurs without compensation for the loss of the net worth of seized assets and potential income. This is why you have to be able to read. This is why you have to be able to research. So let's come back. Let's come back to our source. What does it say? Some countries will nationalize. In general, there will be more regulation covering many different issues such as worker safety and domestic sourcing for certain goods. We've seen that happening already. Here he continues, says, irrespective of the details, the role of the state will increase. Let's make that red. That's very important. The role of the state will increase. You know, what's funny is I looked at my YouTube last night and I was like, well, how come I'm not getting any ad revenue? And I looked and it was like every video was like limited. So when I do these presentations, I'm not getting any ad revenue. It was like, they're like, oh yeah, advertisers aren't touching this. I bet they ain't. The role of the state will increase, and in doing so will materially affect the way business is conducted. To varying degrees, business executives, all industries, and all countries will have to adapt to greater government intervention. Taxation will increase. Now it says here, particularly for the most privileged, because governments will need to strengthen their resilience capabilities and wish to invest more heavily in them. And he goes into something that Joseph Stiglitz here, but here's the problem. Here's the problem right here. It says taxation will increase, particularly for the most privileged. If you watched my stream the other day, I believe it was the Patriot Report series where I'm going through my book and explaining that stuff to you. We talk about what Thomas Sowell says. What Thomas Sowell says about taxation. No, this is a Federal Reserve page I earmarked. I have to earmark the page where he talks about it. So basically what Thomas Sowell has taught me, because again, I don't invent this information. I don't just think it up out of the blue sky. I'm not an economic scholar. I'm a student. I'm a student broadcasting information to you guys. And when something makes sense, it makes sense. So I adopt it. And what Thomas Sowell says is when you do exactly what this thing says, it says taxation will increase, particularly for the most privileged. And what they believe is this will strengthen their resilience capabilities to invest more. Unfortunately, that's not what's going to happen. And Sowell has several cases here. I should just take some time out. Y'all mind if I do this? Y'all mind if I just take some time out to provide y'all with this wonderful information from the GOAT? A lot of people point to Thomas Sowell's work like race and race disparities. And, that's kind of cool. But I feel like basic economics is where it's at. This is a must read for people. Oh man. Okay, here we go. 450 to 451, I believe it is. Let me see. Okay, boom, here it is. Found it. Undaunted, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that an extension of a temporary reduction in the capital gains tax to 50% would cost the Treasury $20 billion in lost revenues, even though this temporary tax cut had already resulted in tens of billions of dollars in increased revenues. What? What? Wait. So, tax cuts have already proven to increase revenue. Yet, The Congressional Budget Office estimated that an extension of a temporary reduction in capital gains tax to 15% would cost the Treasury $20 billion in lost revenues. And he says, even though this temporary tax cut had already resulted in tens of billions of dollars in increased revenues. He continues, from 2003 to 2007, the disparities between the Congressional Budget Office's estimates of tax receipts were off by growing amounts. He says underestimating tax receipts by $13 billion in 2003 and by $147 billion in 2007. Okay, continues. He says back in 1980, when the highest marginal tax rate was 70% on the top income earners, before the series of tax cuts that began in the Reagan administration, 30% of all income tax revenues came from the top 5% of income earners. After a series of tax cuts for the rich over the years had reduced the highest marginal tax rate to 35% by 2004, now more than half of all income revenues came from the top 5%. This is the data. This ain't conspiracy theory. These are the facts. These is the facts. Let's go on. Another example here. When the state of Florida estimated in 2001 how far the money it had set aside to pay its employees' pensions fell short of what was needed to pay, proceeded the arbitrary assumption that it would receive an annual rate of return of 7.7% of investors had made. But in fact, it turned out to be only 7%. Actually, no, my bad. That's not the example I wanted. Wait, where's the example I wanted? He's talking about investing in the government budgets, and I want to stay on tax. Let me find that page. Hold on a second. So that was, what page was that? That was 452, tax versus revenue. Okay, so 620, page 627. And again, like, you get this book, and I tell people all the time, like, you don't have to read a whole book. You know what I'm saying? But you just need to read parts of it thoroughly. Oh yeah, this is the part of the book where it gets juicy. It gets super juicy, this part of the book. Damn. Hold on a second. Look, I think I hear the baby crying. I'll be right back. All right, we back. So I'm gonna find the other pages of the Thomas Sowell work at another time, but he's got several examples. Let's get back to the presentation. Let's see. So, there's a section in the book here called the social contract. Shout out to Thaddeus Russell. Put this book across my desk called The Social Contract by Rousseau. I read that this summer. Very interesting book. Strongly suggest you guys take a look at that. But in this section, I found this verbiage here. It says, this issue is explored in more detail in the chapter on the technological reset. We're going to get into the technological reset in just a moment. But suffice to say that a state emergency can only be justified when a threat is public, universal, and existential. So when we hear all the hoopla about how dangerous something is, well, there you go. This is what justifies expansion of government, right? Okay. In addition, political theorists often emphasize that extraordinary powers require authorization from the people and must be limited in time and proportion. And this is correct, right? But this only works if the people are informed, if the people have read Soul, if the people have read Walter E. Williams, if the people have read Murray Rothbard, if the people have read Mises, if the people are not familiar with these works, the people are not equipped to make decisions for themselves. They are not equipped to make decisions for themselves. But it says here, authorization from the people. But if the media is brainwashing everybody, can we trust the people? Like, which people? We have a divide in America right now. Some people want to do one thing, other people want to do another. So who is the people? Who is the people? Jabari Allen, just checking back in. My kid's teacher left some stuff for my son to do while there is a temporary pause because of the Omarion. My friend's kid got his laptop back from last year. January lockdown coming. Lord Jesus. Shout out to Jabari. Always providing some shekels and insight. Continue. All right. So that's that chapter. We are going to go on to the next series. So that was the big government section. Again, like I said before, when reading books is an art. You don't grab a book and start at page 1. Unless you're reading a fiction, a novel or something. Okay, yeah. 1984, you got to start at page 1. Okay, you can't just skip a chapter because you're going to be missing so much. When you're dealing with nonfiction, hop right into the chapter that interests you most at that time. That's what I do with Thomas Sowell, Basic Economics. This is a 700-page book. You think I read all 700 pages? Hell no. I look at the pieces I don't understand and I study them. Bruce Lee said, I fear a man who practices one kick 1,000 times than somebody who practices 1,000 different kicks, or however this phrase goes, right? So it's better to grab a chapter and be an expert on that chapter than to read a whole bunch of chapters and not retain anything. Right? So it's an art. So when I grabbed this book, this Great Reset book, I didn't read through the whole thing. I said, what do they got here in the table of contents? And I hopped right into the sections that interested me most. And I saw the return of big government, the social contract. And I was like, let's start there. So I read through those. And for the sake of brevity, we're not going to read the whole book today, but we're going to read some of the stuff that popped out to me most. Let's move into Geopolitical Reset. This is Globalization and Nationalization. Let's start there. Or let's go there. All right. So here it says right here, the globalization and nationalization. Now, again, we have to bring into context what our good folks over at the ADL said, what they said the conspiracy theorists said, right? What they say the conspiracy theorists said. Did I lose that source? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong screen. Here it is. Again, advance their interests and push forward a globalist plot to destroy American sovereignty and prosperity. Right? So now we're talking about globalization and nationalism. Right here it says, and this is where they agree, right? Both the left and the right believe in nationalism, right? They believe in what they call deglobalization. And we're going to get into what this really means in a second. Because it doesn't mean globalism doesn't mean what it means, right? Like after I read this and did some thinking, I'm like, I don't think globalism is what people say it is, right? So they agree. And I have an example of that. We're going to pull that up here. This is about Biden and Trump. We know Trump has some issues. So first, let me tell you what globalization really means. Globalization technically means China. It technically means cooperation with China. That's what it means. Deglobalization means removing dependency from China. Now, when the right or whoever is talking about globalization or the globalists, it seems to me it really should be called Westernism, right? Because these are the powers that be, that exist in Europe and the Western world, right? And they're against China. So it's Westernism. The cooperation is between Westernism, Canada, North America, South America, United States, Mexico, and the European Union and the nations of Europe, right? The Western world. That's where the powers that be exist. Like, let's be honest. IMF and World Economic Forum and, so on and so forth. These are all European powers. So it's Westernism is your problem. It's not globalization. It's not globalism. It's not globalist. Because globalism means China. That's globalism equals China. A world where we have to cooperate with China. So let's get back into this and we'll talk about it right now. Because all throughout this document, all he talks about is China. Right here. 97% of antibiotics supplied in the country come from China. I'm pretty sure most of us knew that. China. So we talked about before, we said that there was some cooperation between the left and the right. And they're right. Right here, what's this? The Sydney Morning Herald said Biden boxed in as Trump's big, beautiful monster of trade deal with China expires, as trade deal with China expires. Right? And here they says, the complex backdrop means Biden couldn't have simply axed Trump's tariffs even if he wanted to. He doesn't want to, regarding them as providing some leverage and relationship with China, even as he and his trade officials acknowledge their costs to U.S. companies and consumers. Yes, it's going to affect the U.S. Private interests and consumers. Let's go to the top of this article, though, because it's like really ugly. Right here. Despite the conspicuous failure of Trump's trade war to achieve its objectives, its legacy of the tit-for-tat tariffs that underpin the truce will, however, remain. Trump and Xi Jinping signed a deal in January. Under the China deal, was supposed to give this money. Was supposed to buy, a certain amount of U.S. products in 2020 and 21. But apparently only 60% of the target was hit as of the end of October. Maybe they would have hit it if Trump was around. Maybe Biden and them should have been on top of this. Maybe should have made sure that they made good on their deal. But if Trump set something up and you at 60%, maybe you dropped the ball. But again, the right and the left agree on this China thing, right? Because remember, this isn't globalization. This is Westernism. This is a war between the Western world and China. The complex backdrop means Biden couldn't have simply axed Trump's tariffs even if he wanted to. He doesn't want to, regarding them as providing some leverage in a relationship with China. So Biden, and it's not even Biden, it's people that, his handlers, understand that what Trump did with China is a good thing in their opinion. It hurts us, the little guy, but they don't really care about us. Right? They're trying to have this I don't know, financial war, I guess you can call it. Let's go back. Let's go back to our source. It says here, it is telling that in April 2020, the U.S. administration decided to block a publicly administered pension fund from investing in China. Again, this is a chapter on globalization and nationalism. And what they're talking about is China. Here, global governance says the more nationalism and isolationism pervade the global polity, the greater the chance that global government loses its relevance and becomes ineffective. Sadly, we are now at this critical juncture. Put bluntly, we live in a world in which really no one is in charge. We live in a world in which nobody is really in charge. Why is that a bad thing? I mean, I don't agree. Why does somebody need to be in charge? Hey, so they're kind of like telling on themselves. Again, going back to the ADL article about globalist plot, You know what I'm saying? This is what's going on. Yeah, play with this keyboard, not that one, baby. All right? Yeah, play with my Keychron. $120 keyboard, you're just gonna bang on it. Again, the growing rivalry between China and the US. This is what they're talking about under globalism and nationalism. This is what they're talking about. All right, so that's globalism and nationalism. So again, just to reiterate, what's globalization, people? What's globalization? China. China's involvement. China's. Well, there's two definitions. There's a definition as purported by the powers that be. Globalization, basically saying that cooperation with China, or China's massive power. You know, the fact that 97% of antibiotics come from China. That's globalization to them. Globalization to the Alex Jones people of the world is what I call Westernism. I wouldn't call it globalization. I would call it Westernism because it's basically a European plot. Hold on one second. Yeah, baby, go play. Ugh. Okay? Okay, baby. All right. So we covered globalization. We understand that is all about China, right? Destabilizing China and, so on and so forth. Let's go to, we're going to do tech, and then we're going to talk about the dollar. We're going to talk about dystopian, future, tech, and then we're going to talk about the dollar. And then we're going to get out of here. Come back, baby. Come back. Where is it? All right, so here we go. They call this section the technological reset. Let's see, where is it? Boom, here we go. In this section, the firm, it says, in one form or another, social and physical distancing measures are likely to persist after the demic itself subsides. This is what the Great Reset says. Social and physical distancing measures are likely to persist after the demic itself provides. Now, we said that. We already said this. All right? We knew this. We knew there was no going back to normal. There was going to be a new normal. Real quick, let me ask y'all something. What was the phrase about together, with this whole thing? They said something together. And it goes into like what it says, like when they say physical distancing and social distancing, like social distancing is an oxymoron. You can't be social and distant at the same time. Either you're social or you're distant. So this is like that double speak, I believe that Orwell calls it. It's just a huge oxymoron and very deceptive way of making people accept things that they shouldn't be accepting. Again, so let's continue. It says, In 2016, two academics from Oxford University came to the conclusion that up to 86% of jobs in restaurants, 75% of jobs in retail, and 59% of jobs in entertainment could be automatized by 2030. We're all in this together. Yeah. Keep that in mind. We're all in this together. Keep that in mind for when we finish going through this document. Okay. This section, contact tracing, contact tracking, and surveillance. So here they say successful contact tracing proved to be a key component of successful strategy against the bug. It will be very hard to fight the bug without an effective treatment or a vacation, and until then, the most effective way to curtail or stop transmission of the bug is by widespread testing, followed by isolation of cases, contact tracing, and quarantine of contacts exposed to people infected. Now keep in mind, this was written last year. It says here, contact tracing and tracking are therefore essential components of public health response to the bug. I ain't no conspiracy theorist. This is what the World Economic Forum said. Say it right there. Contact tracing and tracking. And they clean it up really well. But anyway, here they say from the onset, China, Hong Kong, SAR, South Korea implemented coercive and intrusive measures of digital tracing. They took the decision to track individuals without their consent through their mobile, credit card data, and even employed video surveillance in South Korea. Now they're going to go on. That's right here. Now they're going to go on and say how, Japan has introduced measures that protected your privacy. Dave B, since you aren't getting ad revenue, thanks for education. Salute. Thank you, Dave B. Willie Handy, camera looking crispy. Thanks, bro. I still got to tweak it a little bit, but as we getting there, we getting better. That's what they say here, right? And then they talk about Japan, but right here, remember we were talking about together? So the digital tracing solution most lauded and talked about was the Trace Together app run by Singapore's Ministry of Health. Together, trace together. See that word again? Why are all these nations? I'm typing on the wrong key. Why are all these nations, all these leaders using this word together? Are they in cahoots, in cooperation? I don't know. Again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy analyst. Okay. So what they say here is it seems to offer the ideal balance between efficiency and privacy concerns by keeping user data on the phone rather than on the server. Let's stop right there. Oh, actually, I'll finish reading and we'll stop right, and then we'll go back to that point. And by assigning the login anonymously. Okay, that's cool. Keeping the user data on the phone rather than the server. Now, if you weren't in tech or anything like that, you might think to yourself, well, that sounds good. It stays right on my device. But what happens when you live in a country where your government can subpoena and take your phone? What happens when you live in a country with three-letter agencies that can gain access to your information without you caring? What happens if you live in a country where they have passed the Patriot Act, which says, basically nullifies the Constitution. It says we could snoop on your stuff all we want. Then what? It doesn't matter where your data is stored. They can gain access to it. What happens when you live in a country where people like companies like Apple work with the government? Facebook work with the government. They have cooperation with the three-letter agencies. What happens then? Things might happen without your knowledge. So he tries to clean it up really well, but mama ain't raised no fool. So here it says, as the bug crisis recedes and people start returning to the workplace, the corporate move will be towards greater surveillance. So they're saying the corporations are going to have greater surveillance. For better or for worse, companies will be watching and sometimes recording what their workforce does. Wow. Again, this ain't no conspiracy theory. Let's continue. This is what happened after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. All around the world, new security measures like employing widespread cameras, requiring electronic ID cards, and logging employees or visitors in and out became the norm. Continues. The risk is dystopia. So they have to tackle this, right? So here he says, most people fearful of the danger posed by the bug will ask, isn't it foolish to not leverage the power of technology to come to our rescue when we are victims of an outbreak and facing life or death kind of situation? They will then be willing to give up a lot of privacy and will agree that in such circumstance, public power can rightfully override individual rights. So he's showing here our argument. Right? He's not saying he agrees with this. He's just saying this is the argument. He continues, then, when the crisis is over, some may realize that their country has suddenly been transformed into a place they no longer wish to live. Here, he responds, this process is nothing new. This thought process is nothing new. Over the last few years, both governments and firms have been using increasingly sophisticated technology to monitor and sometimes manipulate citizens and employees. If we are not vigilant, warn the private advocates, the Debunk will mark an important watershed in the history of surveillance. Shout out to the homie Debunk. The argument put forward by those who above all fear the grip of technology and personal freedom is plain and simple. In the name of public health, some elements of personal privacy will be abandoned for the benefit of containing the Debunk. Just as the terrorist attacks triggered greater and permanent security in the name of protecting public safety. Then, without realizing it, we will fall victims of new surveillance powers that will never recede and that could be repurposed as a political means for more sinister ends. So again, he's not saying he agrees with this. He's just laying out the argument, right? So how does he end this section on dystopia? Here he says, dystopian scenarios are not a fatality. Hey, you know, this dystopian theory you guys got, it sounds cool in theory, but you know what? It's not actually that bad. I know what you guys are theorizing. I don't say I agree with it, but if so, it's not that bad. It's not a fatality. This is what he says. Dystopian scenarios are not a fatality. What? Jabari Allen together, NWO for everybody. Word. Jabari Allen, Book of Faces is the government. Look up Operation Face Smash in the WikiLeaks. So he continues. It is true that in the post-Debunk era, personal health and well-being will become much greater priority for society, which is why the genie of tech surveillance will not be put back into the bottle. And again, goes back to his previous point, but it is for those who govern and each of us personally to control and harness the benefits of technology without sacrificing our individual and collective values and freedoms. I don't disagree with that last statement. It is on us. It is on us. But I don't know. I feel like that ship sailed a long time ago. The American people just letting that ship sail. But look what he says here. It is true. This is World Economic Forum. It is true that in the post-Debunk era, personal health and well-being will become a much greater priority. So public health and safety is going to be a higher priority than freedom. They're admitting this. This is not conspiracy theory. It's conspiracy analysis. And he says right here, which is why the genie of tech surveillance will not be put back into the bottle. I ain't making this stuff up. It's right there. They saying it. They telling you what's going on. So here he tries to, discredit, and make it sound crazy. Oh yeah, this is what they think. Oh my God, da da da. And then he goes, but you know what? Dystopian scenarios are not a fatality. That's not all bad. And you know what? You're right. Tech surveillance is not going to be put back in the bottle. That shit's here forever. What? Wow. Wow. All right. Let's move into money and the dollar, and then we're gonna get out of here. Where is it? Let's navigate to that page. And this is another Hotep's been told you moment. Where is it? This is under, I think, economic reset. Yes, here it is. The economic reset. All right. And this is funny. I'll touch on some of this, I guess. So this section here, deflation or inflation, it's kind of funny. It says here, two technical elements embedded in the issue of monetary finance are associated with the risk of inflation. First, the decision to engage in perpetual quantitative easing. Now, quantitative easing. Some of you don't know what that word means. So we're going to go back to the GOAT, Thomas Sowell. Hey, Thomas, what does quantitative easing mean? Do I have that page earmarked? I know it's one of the pages on the Federal Reserve. I thought quantitative easing would be in the index, but it's not. So in the meantime, I'll tell you what it means, and then we'll pull up what he says it means. I'm sure this is under the chapter on Federal Reserve. So quantitative easing means printing money, very simply. 374, is it 374? No, we had that one. 374, 384. Maybe it's on page 384. If I don't find it on 384, we're just going to continue. Yeah, I can't find it. But in this book, Basic Economics, Thomas Sowell, quantitative easing basically means printing money. Plain and simple. That's just what it means, okay? I'll find a page to share that with you another time. I don't want to waste too much time. So he pretty much admits it too. He says, first, the decision to engage in perpetual quantitative easing. He calls it monetary finance, right? Doesn't have to be taken when the central bank buys the debt issued by the government, right? So that's like bonds and shit like that. It can be left to the contingent future to hide or circumvent the idea that money grows on trees. Second, the inflationary impact of helicopter money is not related to whether the deficit is funded or underfunded, but is directly proportional to the amount of money involved. Okay, cool. What the hell does helicopter money mean? Does anybody know what helicopter money means? Well, guess what we're going to do? We're going to look it up. There's two types of people in this world. People who look things up and people who don't. So, I'm going to pull up right here on our dystopian Google search engine. And it says right here, helicopter money refers to the increasing of a nation's money supply through more spending, tax cuts, or boosting the money supply. If we go to images, we'll see exactly what it means. Money does grow on trees, I guess, right? So they're very honest when they talk about this. World Economic Forum. They're not going to get around that. Anyway, let's continue. So it says here, the fate of the US dollar. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to go to the part I highlighted. This is very important here. So I'm going to read from here. And it says, are there any viable alternatives? The U.S. remains a formidable global financial hegemon. The role of the dollar in the international financial transaction is far greater, albeit less visible, than in international trade, because we know the dollar is the world reserve currency. All right? Everybody knows this. Yes? Yes? Good. But it is also true that many countries would like to challenge the dollar's global dominance. Many countries would like to challenge the dollar's global dominance. So we have to stop right there. And we got to go back into the history books. An individual murdered by the Obama administration and I'll put this up on the screen in a second and you'll be able to see this. Hold on. Bong bong, and it says right here, based upon this company called the Millennium State, gold dinar, the real reason behind Gaddafi's murder. This is what it says here. It says in 2009, Colonel Gaddafi, then president of the African Union, suggested to the United States that the African continent switch to a new currency, independent of the American dollar, the gold dinar. The objective of this new currency was to divert oil revenues towards state-controlled funds rather than American banks. In other words, to stop using the dollar for oil transactions. Countries such as Nigeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and Angola were ready to change their currencies. Unfortunately, in March 2011, the NATO-led coalition began a military intervention in Libya in the name of freedom. I'll read that one more time. The objective of this new currency was to divert oil revenues towards state-controlled funds rather than American banks. Westernism. In other words, to stop using the dollar for oil transactions. Countries such as Nigeria is like, I don't know, what are they, like number 2 or number 3 in oil reserves or something like that? Tunisia, Egypt, and Angola were ready to change their currencies. Now, as an American, you might want to be happy we got rid of them. I don't know. Depends on how you're looking at this. But it could have destabilized the dollar. It could have affected our economy. Zachary Strong, I read a brilliant book about the colonial mindset driving his lunacy. Seeing Leg Estate by James C. Scott. Shout out. All right, awesome. Great. Yeah, do that shout out on Uncle Hotep's channel. Don't do that shout out on my channel. I don't like that nigga. Anyway. So let's go back to our source here. Let's close that. Cool. So we've already said that many countries would like to challenge the dollar's dominance. It's fifth in oil production. What about reserves? What is Nigeria in? Not oil production, oil reserves. Tell me what it is. Fifth in oil production, but what about reserves? I want to say in that region it's number 2, but let's continue. Thank you for the fact check, Mr. Alchemist. In the short term, there are no alternatives. Right here, it says in the short term there are no alternatives. The Chinese renminbi RBM could be an option, but not until strict capital controls are eliminated and the RMB turns into a market-determined currency, which is unlikely to happen in the foreseeable future. Again, going back to globalism. Globalism is about China. And here it's saying, the World Economic Forum says, if there is a currency that could replace the dollar, it will be China. So let's continue. But it says it's not unlikely to happen. All And I agree. I'm sure because Westernism, right? The same goes for the euro. It could be an option, but not until doubts about a possible implosion of the eurozone dissipate for good, which again is unlikely prospect in the next few years. Now, this is the part you need to pay attention to. As for a global virtual currency, a la cryptocurrency, there is none in sight yet, but there are attempts to launch national digital currencies that may eventually dethrone the US dollar supremacy. The World Economic Forum has just told you that if the dollar is replaced, it will be replaced by a digital currency a la cryptocurrency. Alex Jones been told you that the world was going to move to a one world digital currency, and the World Economic Forum has said so. It's 10th, Natasha. Thank you. So, real quick, let me do a plug. Buy Bitcoin. It's that simple. It's your greatest hedge against the collapse, the looming potential collapse. Go ahead. Get signed up. It's real easy. All you gotta do is drop your email address right in here. It's only $1 transaction. You can start rounding up Bitcoin. It's gonna do it automatically. It's going around your Bitcoin up automatically. And yes, you'll be able to transfer it to a wallet as well. Quick plug. Let's get back. Again, they say it's unlikely any of these countries are going to have a currency that will dethrone the dollar, but there are attempts to launch national digital currencies that may eventually dethrone the US dollar supremacy. So for all those people out there that are like, oh my God, this cryptocurrency, buy gold, and I mean, I'm not saying not to buy gold. One of my favorite investments is firearms and ammo. I think that's a no-brainer investment. Buy as much firearms and ammo as possible, just from an investment point of view. If you go look at the price of ammo and firearms over the years, it's skyrocketed. I remember you get an AR-15 for like $200 or something like that. Don't get me to lying, but hey, that's where we are. That's where we are. So all the people out there telling me, oh, cryptocurrency, what are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, boomer. Okay, boomer. You got it, bro. You got it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my presentation on the Great Reset. This may be just part one. It may be a part two. There's other sections to this book I may get into in the future, but those are, I thought, were the most important to cover. Share this with a family member. Hotep coin is it's in the works. It's in the works. I pushed the date back because we're working on some other things, and I want to make sure it rolls out right. I want to make sure it rolls out on the correct blockchain, and has a good use case. I'm not trying to be another scam coin. So yeah, Hotep coin coming soon. Look out for that. But yeah, people who don't, if you don't have any cryptocurrency right now, get your life together. Just get it together. You on one hand, you're saying, "Oh my God, the World Economic Forum, globalists, blah blah blah, is predicting our future. They're planning a great reset, and they're telling you like, yo, we might move it to a digital currency." And you don't even know how to use digital currency. You don't have any digital currency in your wallet. You got no wallet. You got no digital currency, but you complaining about the Great Reset. This is contradictory. This is contradictory thinking. So you're going to have to hedge your bets, and go get you some Bitcoin. I'll be back tonight. My show with Wendy Yo, we talk relationships. We're going to be talking about gifts you should get your significant other. And then tomorrow night, our premiere show on this channel, Hotep's Been Told You, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Hilarious show. We cover all the major topics of the week with Uncle Hotep. Make sure y'all follow Uncle Hotep. Subscribe to his channel. Shout out to Cannon Hotep and the whole team. Shout out to Taylor. Appreciate you. And remember, Homeschooling Initiative 2020, unstupid your kids, unstupid America. HotepNation.com/donate. Help us drive that initiative and make it a national thing. Love y'all. Hotep, and I'm out.